So we're back with actual books and not just doing a movie/book comparison or anime recommendations. For the first time this year, we're back with actual books. And we're gonna be keeping this around for a good minute before we move into something that isn't books, probably in a few weeks. Well, anyway, we're gonna delve into an interesting world within the matter of literature. Superhero-inspired books. They're interesting to me as they're kind of some of my favorite subject matter. I honestly find most, if not all, superhero books interesting as a lifetime fan of superhero comics and those types of stories in general, stories in media such as the Marvel movies and stuff like that. Anyway, it's generally my jam. So let's move on to the book in question today, Heroine Complex. The book, written by Sarah Kahn, follows protagonist Evie Tanaka, who is the personal assistant to her childhood best friend, Evada Jupiter, who is currently San Francisco's most beloved superheroine after an incident some years ago that gave us select few random people superpowers. Anyway, Evada isn't the easiest person in the world to work for, being a demanding diva who often holds temper tantrums over her social media, as well as how people perceive her. To make matters worse, their personal group is dealing with demon attacks, and Evie's dealing with her own personal issues managing her life and of her younger sister B. To make matters even worse, Eva has her own personal secret. She has disastrous fire powers granted her by the same accident that made a bunch of other superheroes, but she spent most of her time, as well as past few years, concealing them, trying her best to bottle them up alongside her own emotions. But after Evada injures herself in an accident, Evie has to pose as her boss to maintain the image that she's practically invincible, while also keeping control over her fire powers, and dealing with her own personal life starting to slowly change around her because of the switcheroo. As well as said fire powers basically force themselves up front and center. Evie herself is an interesting sort of protagonist for this type of story. In most superhero tales, you either have a Peter Parker type, a Batman type, or a Superman type. When Evie, if she falls along with anything, falls more along with the Spider-Man type if Peter decides to go the other direction instead of using his powers to keep them all, concealed and bottled up. Her whole deal is, again, keeping herself under control as well as bottling up said powers and some negative emotions to keep said powers under control. So the plot is really more about her learning to let go of herself and open up a bit more. Honestly, her personal stuff is actually more interesting than the overarching plot with the demon attacks and demon invasion. I mean, it's important and it's the ultimate conflict at the end of the story, but the more interesting plot points are stuff involving Evie opening up slowly over time. I mean, it's not bad, and it does humorously end in a quite funny way that fits in line with the tone of the story, as well as has a pretty cool resolution. But honestly, the more I read, the more I want to focus more on Evie and her own personal struggles instead of, demon attacks. And, the resulting demon attacks that happen because of it. As for other characters, Avada herself is interesting. She's written to be really annoying, but never really crosses the line of being the most annoying thing in the world, which, at least, for the reader, she's not that super annoying, at least for me personally, which is honestly a really hard line to draw, considering the fact that intentionally annoying characters, more often than not, are annoying to read about. Well, in her case, because she gets a little time on the page, and a lot of her actions are often overly dramatically funny, it often doesn't lead to her being so annoying. At least to the reader, to the character of the universe, she is pretty annoying sometimes. She's controlling and has some issues of her own, namely the whole living up to her own image thing. But throughout the course of the story, even she learns to let go a little bit more, at least subconsciously, or due to some other's influence, and begins to enjoy herself a bit more of her superhero antics. The other characters, including Eva's little sister, are interesting themselves, with a special note going to Avada's bodyguard Lucy, who acts sort of like a voice of inhibition to Evie, which is kind of interesting considering the fact that I don't remember a story where we've had a voice of inhibition character who wasn't strictly written to be an asshole. As stated earlier, the overall plot with the demon invasion stuff is more of a subtle element in the main plot, as again the main plot ends up following Evie learning to occasionally let go and embracing some inhibitions every so often, which is an interesting lesson to be told in the story. While the demon stuff leads to some interesting points, including exactly how demons work in this setting, as well as the origin of the powers, the overall plot works well with it, but the thing about this is that the story also works as a pretty good standalone story. But there are sequel books, as well as a third book on the way, so I guess the one or two minor plot threads that are still left hanging after the first book will be wrapped up some way or another. But again, this works pretty great as a standalone, which is pretty rare to see in today's, society of books, or book environment, book ecosystem. I'll figure out the right word for it sometime later. Anyway, if you're a fan of a more personal superhero tale, I do highly recommend this story. I myself will be getting a sequel sometime later this year, then maybe I will talk about them sometime with you guys. But again, if you're interested in a more personal superhero tale, this one again comes highly recommended. If you're tired of the fate of the world being the most important thing in these types of stories, which honestly they often are.